G-Town, Altan. Welcome to
G-Town.
Dubai. Welcome to Crypto Town.
Thanks.
I'll call you a fractional Habibi because you have an Emirates ID. You just told me you got a place, but you hardly spend time here.
Yeah, fractional Habibi. That's a good title.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yes. All right. So you've been a CS undergrad. You've been a CS masters as well from Imperial College, right? You started your crypto journey from winning NIO's flagship hackathon. After which they approached you, you got poached, right? You got hired as part of the NIO Foundation. You've been a core contributor to the protocol. You led their DA arm, which then spun out as Nuffle. You've raised $13 million from Silicon Valley investors, as you like to call them, right? Led by Electric Capital, right? And now you're building the liquidity layer for XRP and other dinosaur assets, right? Before we get into all of this, who is Altan and what's your story?
Yeah, I'm Altan. I grew up in Turkey. I was there up until I was 18. I grew up in this very small, not small actually, it's 5 million now, a town called Bursa. Didn't know English when I was growing up, so I've learned English when I was 14. Then ended up going to the US. So I did my, as you said, did an undergrad degree in computer science and math. I was really into simulation back then. So virtual reality was my passion. I built on this thing called Oculus Rift. People actually came to my office, came to my room to play Oculus, and one of the hustles I did was kind of charge like $5 to $10 to play, and then you give them like a free beer with it, and people liked it. So that's how I started. Loved programming always, and then ended up finding myself in a master's in computer science. I worked on robotics, and again, but even though it's real world stuff, I found myself working with simulation. Like I was training robots in simulation and applying them to the real world to a robot and how that would work. And that simulation passion pulled me into crypto because crypto also has money, right? Which is the simulation side and money. And that was like very, very interesting for me. I started with Ethereum, started deploying some smart contracts, and that's how I got into NIR, because I genuinely thought in 2022, Rust is a better programming language for building smart contracts. Got into NIR, worked there, and really got this. We were really heavy on building infrastructure, but now with everything going on in crypto, I think there's a way where you can build an app that, if you look at top 10 coins, they are Bitcoin, Doge, XRP, even go down to LTC. They have very high market caps, but they're not very utilized, right? So Bitcoin just started that era, and then now I think this is going to XRP and a bunch of other tokens that people just hold them; they don't earn anything. And people started almost try to do this in 2021, 2022 with Celsius and BlockFi, but the problem of those these apps was that Celsius took your money and then they lend it off chain. And what we want to do at MoreMarkets is to change that and say, hey, if there's actually a venue for me to create on-chain markets, let's do that. And if there's an off-chain market, I'll try to, let's say a basis trade. Right. I'll try to give you transparency on-chain, that the funds are there and what the funds are used for. So that's kind of the shift that happened. And we can talk about the pivot and other stuff, because I think there's a lot of founders that go through that. But for us currently, trying to build this platform where people can come in and deposit and earn not crazy rates, like crazy rates end up in badly, but something that's sustainable around 3 to 5% APYs that people are long on the asset and want to earn.
Right. XRP, I think, is currently at like 0.8%, where you get like a 0.8% yield, not much, right? So you're trying to increase that. We'll come into all of this, right? But before we get into MoreMarkets and everything that you're building, I first want to learn about you as a person, right? Because just like as any early stage investor, they always take a bet on the person, right? So I want to know who Altan is, right? Let's start with like growing up. You grew up in Turkey, as you said, right? And then you moved to the US. When you were growing up, you've highly focused your education on CS, right? As you mentioned, and robotics. Were you always interested in becoming a tech person, but now you're a business founder, right? Like, so tell me about that journey.
Yeah, my brother forced me to. I was 14, 15. I didn't know anything about, programming. My brother was a trader in Wall Street, and he came to me and was sending me A, Z articles and just said, hey, read these things and learn about this thing. So that's where the passion for machine learning came. And certainly like if you're going to the US and if your family is actually devoting a lot of money for you to go to the US, like my parents and I certainly didn't want to study something that I can't use, right? So
Right.
computer science came from that, and it was very hot era. So, and I was very inspired by Silicon Valley, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go US. But overall, like the idea of that, of like going to the US and getting into tech was always there.
So your brother is working in Wall Street and you're in crypto. How does that work out now?
Yeah, my brother's a trader.
Yeah.
He's a very good trader. But he trades like he's more like he's a fundamental trader on commodities, and he now uses actually computer science data, and in his business actually understanding the fundamentals is very important. It's not like crypto where you can actually you can actually trade fundamentals.
Right.
It's actually going pretty well. He's 14 years older than me, so it's always been like a second father that pushes the foot forward.
Sweet. And how did you find crypto? When was the first time you came across crypto?
It was 2017,
Mm-hmm.
when I think ICOs were before ICOs, I think.
But ICOs were 16.
Yeah, 16, 17. So it became very hot. I was in actually South Africa working for a VR company.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, there was also a lot of focus on like Africa getting access to cryptocurrencies. So that's when I started and bought my first Bitcoin and ETH. But I was a student; I didn't have any money, so I ended up selling them because just to pay all this stuff. But really, it happened I was at Antler in 2021, and the Web3 sort of the narrative came in, and I was like, I really wanted to look into this. For me, it didn't start as like investing, more like there's this good technology that you can build smart contracts on. There's this new language called Solidity. You should learn it. There's no ChatGPT back then, so you have to go through the curriculum, or maybe it's some read docs. And that was the main where like, oh wow, this is a technology that you can deploy smart contracts. And other people like Charles, if he's a developer, can read that smart contract. That was pretty interesting. So that was the first kind of getting into crypto.
Right. And you mentioned Antler. I was going to touch upon this because you were an analyst at Antler for 10 months, right? And then you attended their EIR program, right? So usually the goal of an EIR is to either figure out what you want to build or find a co-founder, right? What was it for you? What was that journey like for you?
Yeah, I didn't do a traditional EIR program at Antler. That was because I was an analyst working with the founders, and I told them I want to start a company. That was actually like almost, I was getting paid, but the pay if I were to start a company, they would have some sort of shit like a safe investment into the company. So the reason why I didn't find a company back then, I was 23, 24 years old, and I just felt like I needed more experience in crypto, especially if you wanted a founder. So that was one of the reasons I picked a near job rather than finding a company and then failing it, and build my network and have more understanding of how the crypto market works. But going back, I think it was a good decision not to find a company back then, because I also didn't have any co-founders around me.
Right. And then the near hackathon happens, and then I think that idea gets selected in the Outliers DeFi cohort as well, right? Did you go ahead with that? What was the scale of that project at the time?
So we had two different projects. One that I've done at ETH Warsaw. So that got actually poached by Outlier Ventures. So the guys that were there, they started a company. And I think it's failed now, but I didn't have any shares and stuff. That was pretty much a passion project. The next one, I did something around DAOs in 2022. I implemented some of I think it was one of the Paradigms blog posts on Near and Rust, and that got picked. But then really how I got into Near was there's Cronenir Harshit who approached me, and he's a very well-known hustler in the Near Foundation. And he was like, "Oh, look, you're technical, but also you can present. So we need somebody like that in your foundation." So that's how I got poached and joined Near.
How was your experience? How was your Near journey like, right? And dive into some details, right, from a lens of someone who's worked very closely with the foundation but has now stepped out. And how has that experience been helpful for you in judging what should you do for more, or what you've done at Nuffle as well, right? Because you've seen the pre-TG, the post-TG journey of a huge protocol, right? Now you know what works, what doesn't work. How do you apply it in your own founder journey?
That's a good question. So for Near Foundation, I really loved it. One of the benefits of me working at Near that maybe other founders didn't have is I had access to, like, I've got access to Ilya, and Ilya is a lot of people that is like, he's very smart and he has a lot of different ideas, and he's almost too smart to, for crypto. And I really love that. So that was one of the things I've gained. And just seeing, like, working at a foundation, for me, the benefit was, like, look, I've interacted with investors, interacted with community, I've interacted with foundations, totally different. There's a labs entity that does all the technical stuff. So I think it's a great way to start a founder journey, because you not only have to understand what tech does, but also have to sort of, like, be an advocate for the protocol, and how to be an advocate for the protocol. And that's kind of the first thing that a founder does, founder doesn't do much, right? Like, founders just basically job is to, present the company and basically gets opportunities and lead it to the right people in the team to execute. So for that reason, I think Near Foundation was a great start. And, like, Near has also had what I'm most proud of is a lot of good tech. So, like, if you can, for me, my personal goal has been, okay, now there's this amazing tech, how do you kind of use it to gain adoption of this protocol and get more users, in a sense.
Got it. And again, coming back to my original question, right? If you were to point out 3 things that worked for Near and that didn't work for Near, that you now have imbibed in MoreMarkets, or you want to learn from that experience, right? What would those 3 things be?
3 things worked at Near. That didn't work. Let me think.
Yeah.
Because we can cut it, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that didn't work, but
you can start with that.
One of the maybe things I've learned at Near was that, as an engineer, I always thought, great tech can win, and I really credit what Near team and Ilya did early on for the Sharded blockchain. I think it's one of the best blockchains out there. But also, you also have to pay attention to distribution and who are your users, who are going to use this. So that's something that, like, I think Near could have done better, but, like, something I've learned that you should pay attention to as an engineer, that tech is not the only thing. And that really shapes how we think in MoreMarkets too. That's one. Things worked. I think that's pretty much what I have from that experience that I can pull. That's been really helpful, that as an engineer, tech is not the only thing that you should focus on. As a business guy, you have to figure out also, like, where you get your distribution, so that's something Ilya learned eventually too. But he also says he's learned in the like, after. The other thing he's taught me, maybe, is something I've learned from Ilya, is Near was pretty much ready to be shipped in 2019. It didn't have its own consensus algorithm, but it had, like, Tendermint baked in. And one thing he told me is, like, I wish, Ilya's words, I shipped the protocol earlier, right? Because that time, like, a one year time for people to come in and build is a long time that eventually becomes exponential. So that learning is, like, if you can ship as fast as you can, then you have, like, started, even though your numbers are not there and stuff, like, just get it out there, right, and then advocate for it, and then people will come and use it.
Right. The first point I really agree with you is that the best product doesn't always win, but the best story does, right? And that's the point of this episode, or this podcast series in general, right? To know the person behind the tech, right? The second thing, I've always heard, like, very mixed opinions about them, especially in crypto, because a lot of people say that, oh, why did Polygon or why does Near not pump anymore? Because there's nothing to speculate, right? They shipped whatever they can, right? So again, I'm not sure on that, but interesting point there.
It's hard. Like, it's hard to keep a narrative going for, like, 6-7 years, right? And crypto is mercenary for narratives, in a sense. Like, there's an AI narrative, and there's like RWA narrative, there's a stablecoin narrative. Like, it's nice to have a narrative, but at the same time, when you look at traditional venture and now crypto, things have been consistently in top 100. Like, if you look at Hyperliquid and Ethena, they both have products that people use. Ethena did solve a very important problem, which was, like, I have my ETH and I want to go long and want to collect some premium. Ethena helped that. Like, Hyperliquid Perps is one of the most used like I use Perps myself, right? And it's an amazing product, and that eventually becomes a platform. So I think having a product and driving the narrative after that is the attitude I want to have.
Got it. So let's talk about your near D experience, right, which then spun out as Nuffle, right? First, let's talk about what was the reason behind the spinning out of near, right? After that, what was your fundraise journey like, right? And then we'll talk about the branding, etc.
Yeah, near DA was a great experiment. In August 2023, we basically were like, the roll-up's coming, and we looked at our tech stack at near what to build there. And DA was the first one that took our attention because white paper talks about data availability and it does it in a very interesting way. And Ilya and the team were like, let's just build something. So we built that in 30 days. That was a smart contract that lives on near that exposes DA. And the reason we're spin-off was just, I just wanted to be a founder. So it started with February where I was like, I really want to be a founder. And I got my first check from Canonical. That was a 500K check. And but Anand was like, I'm investing you. It's not about like whatever you do. So I didn't even know back then that it was going to be a DA project. And then I talked to Ilya, and Ilya just told me like, you've been working on this, and you guys have been doing a good job. Just take this and see what happens, right? So that's how we spun out. For my fundraising journey, I was pretty lucky. Like I didn't have to do any hard work, and it was just too easy for me. And that's always gives people an illusion of like how easy it was. So I don't want to like, I don't want to put myself into the same class because it's kind of, I was already working at Near. People knew that we were working on DA, and people were excited about what we're doing. So when we said spin-off, everybody wanted to invest. So for that reason, not every founder will have the same experience as I do. I was very lucky in a sense, right? Like it was a good time, right time, right product, because there was Celestia at the time was pretty hot. So that's how we like raised the seed round. But one of the things I heard from our lead investors is like, obviously there's DA, but like we've invested in you. You'll have to figure out what you want to do, right? So if this doesn't work, you should be candid and intellectually open about it and move on. That's how we kind of started Nuffle.
And which you've done beautifully, right? Because not a lot of founders talk about their pivot journeys so openly, right? And I'm sure there's a ton of learnings that you've gained from this experience, right? If you want to break down that, the art of pivot, right? And then owning up to it, right? Like for new founders who are just getting into the space, right? What does it look like? Walk me through the timeline. First of all, the first step of pivoting is accepting the fact that your first baby project might not, it didn't reach escape velocity, right? Yeah. What was that moment for you?
Yeah, for me, like it was pretty simple, right? Like basically I looked at DA with the team, and DA just doesn't accrue any fees, right? It's very cheap on Near. That's one of the actually almost feature, not a bug for Near, but for us, it was a bit of a problem, right? Just because you've just raised, you're just looking at your revenue metrics and like, I need like 1,000 roll-ups for this thing to maybe matter a little bit. So that was first. Second, like obviously comps for any project that you're doing, right? Like for example, in that comp, we would have comped to Celestia and Avail. Celestia at the time was 20 billion, and that was the top. And then you look at Avail, it was kind of 900 million, went to 300 million. They both have owned the blockchain themselves, right? They almost like verticalized like blockchain for DA. And for us, we did not own the blockchain. So for me to actually get a pretty high sustainable token, that's pretty hard, right? Like we would have not have had the same success as Celestia and others do. And the other thing is like accepting that is pretty hard in a sense. So like this thing just didn't work, and I just need to move on, right? For example, we were like very intellectually honest that in the long term, this is gonna hurt the investors, hurt the founders, hurt the team. Because like I certainly want to build something that sustains, right? Even though I leave the company that has some sort of a value that I've created that I don't have to be there anymore. So that was one of the that's the thinking behind it, and I think accepting and communicating that to people as soon as you can is probably the way to go. And this is quite of an interesting thing with crypto founders. this doesn't exist in normal venture. Like normal venture is kind of like accepting the fact that like you can pivot as long as you take a bunch of shots, and one of them, if you see it's going, just go try to do a home run with that. So I think compared to Silicon Valley investors and normal investors, Silicon Valley acceptors are more receptive to pivots than like crypto investors that you got somebody bought into the narrative, not the founder. That's one of the learnings, and I'm lucky that Electric is one of the probably the most Silicon Valley investors out there that are like, just think through your reasoning and go through your thinking and make sure that like your thinking is aligned. And obviously your thinking is going to change over time too about products but yeah.
Right. So first step comes accepting, right? What was the next step in your journey? Was it aligning the team? Was it identifying what's the next market gap that you want to go after?
Yes. The second one was kind of, we built sort of a tech. So like when we were building DA, we were also working on an AVS. And the AVS was pretty much like a message passing layer, like a fast message passing layer. And we obviously, just like with any product, we're like, let's just build something that shows the product, right? So we built, on top of our AVS at the time, we built a what we call like universal staking at the time, that you can take any asset from any chain and then mint a synthetic version that is specific for a certain app. So like, let's say for EigenLayer, I stake my EigenLayer, as I stake my NEAR, it goes directly to EigenLayer. It can't go anywhere. It's not like a wrap token. So we built that infrastructure, and we're like, EigenLayer is a small like market, right? It's like 16 billion, maybe 16 billion TVL, and candidly, like, there's not that much demand for other assets. So we're like, let's just look at what are the other bigger assets out there. So looked at XRP, looked at Doge, looked at all the other ones, and really I did a very basic napkin math of like, let's take the TVL and let's take the market cap and do a basic table of like XRP, Doge, all of them. And when you look at it, XRP is like 0.05% usage, and it's very low, right? And then you look at ETH and Sol, they're like 16 and 8 or 9. I'm like, this is a big market, and they're not serving it. So let's just try to build something there. That's how it started, and we so that was kind of the thinking process of like, the second is like, this is a big market, I'm gonna go after it. And then I started communicating to investors like, this is a big market that we should go after.
And how did that conversation go? Like aligning your team and aligning your investors?
Team is pretty easy. Like I think team at an early stage is not big at all. Like we were 5 or 6 people at the time, so it's pretty easy to go after. Investors, some people will take, in a sense, like, what are these guys doing? But I'm okay with that. I'm like, I'm totally comfortable. Some people are just like, what are you guys doing? Because you can explain them, but Electric has been super like supportive in the sense that like, you guys should go after these assets. It's a big market, definitely a great idea, right? So got that feedback, at least from our lead investors. That was satisfactory for us.
Got it. I love the fact that you keep mentioning Electric again and again, because we've done so many founders now, right? And one thing I always ask them that what are a few things that your cap table actually helps you with other than just the money, right? And very clearly, I think you've gotten a lot of support in terms of like building your thesis and shipping the product from them.
Yeah. No, it's been great. Avichal and Curtis have been super helpful. And I think they're one of the out there investors that will actually like roll up their sleeves and get into the weeds, right? There isn't that many people that do that.
Sweet. One sec. All right, let's now get into the gist of it. Let's talk about more, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I was like, thank you. Perfect.
You want to continue?
Ask again.
Yeah, awesome. Let's get into the gist of it. Let's talk about more. I believe you have a very exciting announcement for everyone, right? What is it? What's going live today? Why should people care?
Yeah, so let me go back to, we identified the market. And,
yes, the DeFi utilization rate that you talk about, right? Like BTC at 0.93, XRP at like 0.8, right? All right, you explained us the napkin math behind it. Continue from there.
Yeah, so for you to pretty much take these assets, the traditional way to do this is like bridging, right? So you go to BTC, you take your BTC, and you bring the Ethereum, and then you decide as somebody like Charville, like I'm going to deploy it here and I'm going to earn. Right? So that experience is very bad. Right? You have to juggle 3-4 different front ends. You have to also, like as Charville, really need to understand DeFi to be able to make money on your BTC. For us, what we've realized is a lot of these holders, like BTC, XRP, and Doge holders, they don't really understand how DeFi works. Right? So they're rather just like in a financial sense, like a broker or like anybody that you go and be like, take this asset and generate yield for me. What we do is we do that for the broader retail market, right? And Celsius and BlockFi tried this in 2021, 2022, but they were very opaque about how they generate yields. So the idea of MoreMarkets is to be this liquidity layer, liquidity marketplace where people can come in, deploy just one click, very easy on the app, and you can try it today if you want. Go to MoreMarkets XYZ. You can deposit your XRP, and then basically that's it. You don't have to do anything else, like an exchange experience. But on the back end, what we do is we basically still self-custodial. You give us rights to basically mint another token that's, let's say, more XRP. That goes to, I'm giving another name just for blockchain, Polygon, generates yield on that. Like just like we are the curator, so we're curating the vault, like in a more of a sense, and then we're earning yield on it and returning back to you on the XRP ledger. So as a user, like you don't have to do anything, but for the benefit, we're giving yield to tokens that don't have native yield, and that's like a very large portion of crypto top 10 market cap.
Right. And there's a saying, right? Like if you don't find a way to make money work for you when you're sleeping, you're going to work until you die, right? And that's exactly the gist of MoreMarkets, right? Putting it in like really simple terms, right? You take XRP, you deposit it in MoreMarkets vault, and you earn more XRP, right? End of the day, it's a yield earning product, right? Let's talk about the tech stack here and the architecture for a second, right? I think you've incorporated near chain signatures here, right? And when I'm depositing my tokens into the vault, right, you're minting another token representation, right, which is a non-custodial asset, right? Which basically means no one else is controlling that asset, right? It sits in a vault or a smart contract, right? It doesn't sit with you as a team, right? There is no asset manager behind it, right? How is it happening without leaving that particular bridge, right? Without leaving that particular network, because you mentioned that it's not bridging, it's not going anywhere else, right? Explain that to us.
Yeah, so there's two ways to kind of earn on XRP, let's say. So one could be that your XRP, you deposit XRP, so you have your own wallet that goes to a MPC account that's held by near chain signatures. So currently, near chain signatures is around like 10 nodes. It's going to 30 nodes. So,
can you explain MPC? I know it's slightly complicated, but just break it down.
In a simpler terms, 10 parties come in and they sign that this is like we're holding this asset. So rather than just one wallet holding that, there's 10 different parties that need to come together and say we're signing for it. So those 10 actually, you still hold the keys, but you hold the keys with them. And then in our case, you have this network plus a token that we give on XRP Ledger that sits with you, right? So even though these people, 10 people want to attack you, they can't because they basically need the token that comes from you to sign it, right? So that's something MoreMarkets has done. It doesn't come with near chain signatures. But essentially it's a decentralized way to hold custody, right? Like Fireblocks use it, bunch of like custody solutions use it, like institutions use it. So we open that up to retail. So that's one. You put the XRP in. We mint a synthetic version of more XRP that lives in your account, right? So XRP accounts can be on Ethereum, but through chain signatures they can. So you hold the more XRP, and then there's no asset manager per se, but you basically say I want to earn on this asset, and MoreMarkets, let's say strategy, comes in and says, hey, I'm going to deploy this to, I'm giving a name, just random, Morpho, and then I'm going to earn from it, right? So you still kind of like, we're the quote unquote curator for the asset, and that yield is generated, let's say on Ethereum, then we use intense networks to take, let's say USDC and pay it back on XRP. We use currently near intense, but the technology is generalized enough that we can use any intense network. So it's a complicated tech stack, but as a user, you don't see it. But in the background, we're using MPC, which is very crypto secure in a sense, and then we use Intense Network to pull it back, the money. So all like as a user, you're earning XRP on the XRP ledger, right? So, yeah, but it has like obviously we use smart contracts on these chains because XRP ledger doesn't have smart contracts yet. But yeah, that's pretty much the tech stack.
Got it. And how is the token that you're minting different from a wrapped asset?
So it is different in a sense that you as a user don't go to the other blockchain and claim that it's your asset, right? Like it's all happens at once. And I call this, we haven't done this yet, but I call this like Brozit in a sense. Like Infinix guys did Switch, right? Which is like swap and bridge in one action. Ours is kind of like you bridge and deposit in just one click, right? Versus like going through a bunch of hoops. So that's different than a wrapped asset in a sense. Like you can't just take it and be like, hey, I'm going to go to this. It's more limited, but it's limited for a certain use case.
Got it. And all of this complicated tech stack is basically abstracted away from the user, and all they see is deposit button and then claim button, right?
Correct.
And I got the chance to try out the product. It's beautiful, right? I love the theme, I love the UI, right? I love the color scheme. It's that sand dune vibe, right? Which is that it showcases wealth, bro. That's the color of the buy, right? I remember you also spoke about this, that increasingly a lot of DeFi apps will be showcased as neobanks, right? For example, EtherFi as well, right? Is that what your goal also is with the product? Because again, as you mentioned, your broader target audience is not the crypto degen Twitter, right? It's retail audience, right? So what is the design thinking behind this?
Yeah, so the design thinking is giving access, these DeFi opportunities to people that don't have access, right? Obviously, there will be people in DeFi that, let's say, might do stablecoin deposits and say, like, I want MoreMarkets to find the best yield for me for this asset. That's fine. Like, there's a lot of products like that. But really, what we want to come at is like, you're sitting at exchange. Exchange is giving you 0.81%, and they don't give you any DeFi yield for these assets. Like, they're just giving it. Probably they don't tell you where the yield comes from. You just give it to them, and it just happens. For us, it's kind of take it one step further, where in exchange it's custody. In us, you have self-custody, right? Even though you come with it, you've seen in Gmail, X, whatever, you can create any account. And then the second step of this is like, I want you to know where the yield comes from. I don't want to, and you're very aware of it, so that when you take it, sort of deposit, like what risks you're taking, right? So that's one of the design principles with us, is like self-custody, transparency, all these that exchanges don't have. So in a sense, like we're trying to be this earning platform, like almost like a savings technology for your crypto. That's pretty much going to be the growth plan is going to be, obviously start with XRP, have some stable coins, and eventually grow to like Bitcoin, Doge, any of these big chains, then we can do stuff like staking and others that still retail doesn't have as much access. Like, Binance, for example, just for Near example, but for Near, Binance gives 4%, but usually the staking yield is like 7-8%. So they're getting a large cut, right? For us, I'm not working for MoreMarkets, but I'm working actually for the user. Like, how do I make sure that I give you the best rate possible for this asset, plus the DeFi, right? So that's the vision.
Got it. There are two things in the particular sentence that you said I want to dive into. First, let's talk about yield, right? What are some of these strategies that you're using to provide like a 3 to 5% of yield on XRP, right? Because earlier, as we mentioned, ETH has always been up to 3 to 4%. Sol has even seen like up to 8%, right? But XRP has never seen this much. What is it that you guys are doing differently here?
So those ETH and Sol, they have staking rewards, right? So basically, you put your asset, and then you secure the network, and you get paid by it. So for us, XRP does not have native yield. So the way to generate yield is two ways. One, it's basis trading. So you can give us the XRP. By that, you're long on XRP. And then we basically go to perp dexes and short XRP. So you have basically like delta neutral yield that comes from
like
that.
What Athena did.
As well as Athena does, yeah. And the other way to do it, which is very specific to XRP, it might not apply to BTC, and others maybe can. You put XRP, we mint more XRP, we borrow, we basically borrow RLUSD, which is Ripple's stablecoin, against XRP at a 50% LTV. So that means if I put 10 XRP, I can now have access to 5% of yield. And then RLUSD is a stablecoin, right? And dollars is pretty much became like stablecoins are growing. So I can use that to generate yield on any, I can swap it to USDC. I can provide RLUSD to Aave, earn 8-9%.
Right.
So that's the yield comes from pretty much on chain is to give access, anything that Aave, all these that XRP doesn't have access to, have access through MoreMarkets.
Got it. Since most of this yield or all of this yield is being sourced from DeFi strategies, are there any supply constraints to this? Do you need a minimum number of, is there a threshold of supply that you'll need for this to generate the promised 3 to 5% continuously?
So the graph looks like almost as the supply goes up, the yield will go down. And you saw this with Athena too, right? Like Athena had very large APY, and then, but that also means like the product gets more secure after a certain point. So we'll start with like small caps. Haven't decided on the caps yet, but like cap it a little bit, cap it a little bit, and cap it a little bit. Just from my top of mind, like from XRP basis trade can scale up to like 150 to 200 million in certain venues, right? So you can do that. For yield, as long as we have access to RLUSD, which is the stablecoin, as long as you have access to stablecoins, you're not capped as much, but it still is like obviously a DeFi problem, right? DeFi markets are not as liquid as CeFi markets, so but you can still grow to like billions pretty easily.
Got it. The yield that the end user receives is in XRP itself, right? The native token, which is different from what we see in other platforms, right? Was this a conscious decision that was made, and what was the thinking behind this?
This was actually thinking came from restaking. When we work with Eigenlayer, one of the things I've realized with restakers is that the idea of a restake is getting like a token, like let's say some AVS token. They specifically said, and I remember, we will swap this to ETH, right? Because I'm restaking and staking ETH, so I want the ETH back, right? So, and that was a conscious decision. And the second thing is like we don't want the token to be, let's say, in the project's token. We want this to be in stable token or anything, so that we can actually swap it to XRP pretty fast, because stable coins are the most liquid in the markets today. So it was a very conscious decision that if somebody, and like if you kind of take the example of staking, if you're staking, then you're getting, if I'm staking near, I'm getting near rewards back, right? So it's the same concept that if you're long on XRP, you should be getting XRP. If you're long in BTC, you should be getting BTC.
Got it. You mentioned that there's no yield ecosystem as such in the XRP system, right? Let's say in a world where MoreMarkets does pioneer that, right? And how we've seen in the DeFi ETH ecosystem is that there's a lot of yield games that these protocols play, right? How do you plan on making MoreMarkets as the go-to hub for this?
Yeah, so the way to think about it is if you have a very successful app, then you can start building a platform around it. Right, so if you look at Athena and Hyperliquid, they have started as a very successful app, and then they've gone down to create a platform. So I think the MoreMarkets vision is to, just like an exchange, is to be this decentralized, almost earning platform where you obviously start with XRP, but then you can build primitives around what can you do with BTC, Doge, and others in its own platform, right? So that eventually, if Sharwa wants to build something on these primitives, they can come in and build, let's say, something around XRP liquidity that we built, right? So that's the longer term vision, but I think it's important to recognize that to do that, you need to be very successful in the short term, right? You need to earn the right to be able to do that. So for that reason, like the platform, it will take some time to get the app, get the users in. But eventually, if you have like XRP holders, BTC holders in this platform, then you can build products around it and become a platform itself. So we're not like playing this. ETH is very mercenary. So if you go to ETH worlds, and there's LPs that come in, and they, there's deals that people do like 6-month lockups, 12-month lockups, whatever. XRP in BTC is evolved to be that way. XRP is not that way, right? Like XRP Army is very passionate about the asset, and if you can provide liquidity or provide any benefit to them while they hold XRP, you're earning almost a cult around you to be able to do that. So that's the goal. Like it will take time
Right.
to build that, but that's the main vision, is that the more stuff you can, like an exchange, um, benefit the users, I think you have a very successful business and very successful protocol at the same time.
Right. You've done a good job at attracting the first few sort of users already, right? Like when your waitlist process was on, you
Yeah.
were cracking like 30,000 XRP holders already, right? As someone who's not really part of the XRP cult or the army, right, and people who've been observing them from outside, can you XRP pill me, right? Or how has your experience been so far from being an ETH or near guy who's now like
Yeah.
put his hands into the ecosystem?
One of the things Ripple Labs have done that is underappreciated probably in ETH community is to tell people simply what XRP is for. And XRP is for banks and institutions, and they're creating this like products around XRP and RLUSD to be the next version of banking and financial markets. That's something that ETH has missed, is that ETH talks to people like me who are very almost like quote unquote right curve, but wasn't able to talk to the, pretty much anybody that is working for their money, and they want to, they want something. If they buy ETH, they want something out of it, right? They want to just be part of a movement, and XRP has done that really well. I think Ripple Labs has done a phenomenal job, sort of making people understand what XRP is for, and that's something I've learned that is very unique to the XRP army, is to understand that this is the next financial evolution, and really learn how Ripple businesses come together to build that. So that was very different. It doesn't exist anywhere in ETH and Solana.
Right. And how was your experience attending the conference you were just talking about earlier?
Just people are very passionate. They love it. They love XRP. They're very excited about Brad is the CEO, vision. They also built like a community around them. They're very unified compared to ETH community, because they've gone through a lot. Like Ripple was sued by SEC in 2020.
Right.
Just got, that was removed almost 2 months ago, and that 5 year of just struggle like made people stick together. And yeah, you don't have that many games that ETH and other people do, right? Like you don't have scandals every week like this project did this. So that made people to like unify more, and people come in and just talk about XRP. Like that's their whole passion.
Right.
And it's amazing to see versus, ETH community is very not unified, right? There's a lot of camps around ETH. That was quite interesting to see, and it's one of the things I think is like it's easier to build a product around simpler use cases around XRP than ETH, because ETH you have to like always find something super niche. That was very interesting to see.
Right. As you mentioned, right, like Ripple is known to be working with these different financial institutions, banks, etc. Right? Are you looking at the TradFi division for MoreMarkets right now, whether it's for partnerships or for yield strategies? Is that an active effort?
Yeah, just with this, so we obviously take XRP deposits, but we also have an almost what we call USD Plus product that, let's say you're on Ethereum, so if you're a DeFi, you can come in and put your RLUSD to a MoreMarkets vault, or you can come from the XRP ledger and then put your RLUSD. And what we do in the background, just RLUSD as a stable coin, it's not a yield bearing token. So you can actually earn yield through other venues, like basis trading is one. You can use RLUSD in markets like Aave, and that's the other way to think about it. That's like the DeFi / institutional if people want to get involved in stablecoins. The other thing we're kind of experimenting with right now is there's a bunch of asset managers that hold XRP, but they want different setups, right? They don't want to take smart contract risk. They don't want to, they don't want to be actively involved in DeFi. So we've started looking into like, how do we, let's say Charvel's account, which is an asset manager account, holds XRP. How do we synthetically mint what we call iMore XRP
Mhm.
and use that in like DeFi. And let's say Charvel doesn't want to take smart contract risk. We use zkTLS to mint it, and me and as a business, I get an agreement with Charvel, the company, that say, hey, if there's a liquidation happens, this is how we're gonna handle liquidations. So it's a bit of a different flow for institutions, and eventually, like my vision is to create not only a retail earning platform, but also like a separate institution window that you can take stable coins, you can take anything else, but that's down the, yeah, again, you have to earn the right to do so.
Are we going to see Altan in suit?
Yeah, I was thinking about wearing one
Yeah.
today, but eventually I think we'll have to,
Yeah.
Even Ilya did it, so we'll have to do it at some point.
Awesome, man. I think I'm pretty excited for the new product rolling out today. I'm sure there are going to be a ton of people trying it out. I already got to try it out. Beautiful UI, beautiful experience. And yeah, looking forward to more things coming out of more. Looking forward to more things from you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
For having me.
man.